Hello everyone, David Adler here. I'm the President of the Australian Jewish Association. Now, not only am I with a very special guest today, but also in a very special location. This is Gideon Rosner. He's the Director of Policy of the Institute of Public Affairs, and we are in their brand new studio doing an AJA video here for the first time, hopefully not the last time. Gideon, thank you for agreeing to appear on the AJA social media.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little about your role with the IPA, the sort of breadth of things that you cover?
So I'm the Director of Policy here at the IPA, where, for your viewers who aren't aware of what we do, we're Australia's oldest and loudest free market think tank, going back 75 odd years.
And the best?
And I would argue the best, but I'm biased. So as Director of Policy, my job is to guide our outlook on issues. I do a lot of our front-facing media, mostly Sky News, but also I write op-eds, I speak at functions, I do sort of the breadth of our policy work, and no particular specific focus, whether it be our concern for free speech, free markets, red tape, legal rights. I sort of, for lack of a better way to put it, have to be on top of all our different issues that we have going.
Well, I want to say that one of our most important collaborations is with the IPA, who have been very supportive of AJA, and we align on a lot of policy issues. So let's take free speech as an example. I think we're the only Jewish body that came out in favour of the repeal of 18C. Now that we've got a new LNP government, do you see that issue getting life again in the next couple of years?
Look, I'm not sure what's going to happen as a matter of politics. I certainly hope so, and I do commend the AJA for coming out and supporting 18C and being the only Jewish organisation to do so. I'm personally, obviously, of the faith myself, and also a proud and paid-up member of the AJA. But it is important that we, as people in the Jewish community, do put those dissenting voices out there, because freedom of speech is something that matters to all Australians.
Well, seeing you've mentioned that you are Jewish and that you are a member of AJA, I should come clean and say I'm also a member of the IPA and support the work in that respect. We would argue actually that free speech is consistent with Jewish values. The way that Jewish academia has developed over the millennia is, our sages arguing various issues backwards and forwards. Is that being lost in Australia at the moment? Do you see real restrictions on important discussions, universities, for example?
Yeah, you've touched on a really, really important point, and this is a lot of what I do with the Peter Ridd case, but also broadly a lot of our interest at the IPA is with free speech on campus. You're absolutely right. We cannot have intellectual growth. We cannot engage in the perennial search for truth without free and open debate that is as free and open as possible, barring things like incitement of violence.
Of course.
But aside from that, even if speech is offensive, even if speech is even denigrating or confronting, as soon as you start erecting barriers to free and open discussion, you choke, and you have a chilling effect on our idea to engage with each other, to push ideas and to be provocative. That's what allowed a Charles Darwin to break free from the constraints of creationism. That's what allowed for Albert Einstein to break free from Newtonian physics, and that is what has allowed, I suppose, our community to continually engage in our own internal debates and our own development of our law and values as Jews.
One of the areas that has been raised in Australia very recently, partly as a result of the Israel Folau case and partly as a consequence of the same-sex marriage debate or resolution, is religious freedom. Now, it sort of overlaps with freedom of speech, as we've seen. What's your view on what's happening in Australia with regard to religious freedom, and is the IPA engaged?
We are engaged, and so religious freedom is best understood, I suppose, as a combined exercise of more fundamental rights. You can't exercise religion freely without the freedom of speech, the freedom to speak to espouse your religious views. You can't practice religion freely without the freedom of association. The right, for example, of a Jewish school or an Islamic school or a Christian school to hire teachers that are best able to impart its values and ethos. And you can't have religious freedom without freedom of conscience, freedom to act in a way that aligns with your religious values. The current proposal to put before Parliament a Religious Discrimination Act may be a mistake and may tip the balance too far in the other direction. I don't think it's a good idea for the Australian government to legislate for religious freedom. It's not the government's to give, because then consequently it will be the government's to take away. And the other thing we have to worry about is if an offence clause is built into a Religious Discrimination Act like 18C, where it would be unlawful to insult or offend somebody on the basis of their religion. That's how we could end up with blasphemy laws, meaning that we couldn't satirise or even criticise elements of other religions, and that would take away a really, really big freedom in other areas.
I know one of the concerns that's been voiced to us, and I welcome your comment on it, after the same-sex marriage legislation, clerics have been, if you like, protected, so that if you're a rabbi or a priest or an imam and you're asked to do a same-sex marriage, you can decline to do so on the basis that it's contrary to your faith. We would argue that religious freedom is freedom to do something or freedom not to do.
Correct.
But other categories of people are not protected. Yep. Those in the service industries, the classic baker case, or if you're a printer or venue hirer, if you are orthodox, the same religious obligation applies to you, but there's none of the protections. You can be fall foul of the anti-discrimination laws.
Correct. And that was the most disappointing thing about the same-sex marriage plebiscite. Look, I have no objection to same-sex marriage. Frankly, I think in a perfect world, the Marriage Act would actually be abolished and marriage would be entirely a matter for individuals contracting and for their religious congregations. But in the absence of that, on balance, sure, gay marriage, I'm in favour of it. But as I said, an important part of freedom is freedom of conscience, and Malcolm Turnbull made a lot of promises during the course of the same-sex marriage debate that religious freedom would be protected. No amendments were made to the same-sex marriage bills to actually protect religious freedom, that Malcolm Turnbull sort of wanted them to sail through the Parliament to get the bill passed by Christmas. And that's very disappointing because, as you said, people of good faith who believe in the traditional definition of marriage, who aren't necessarily homophobic but have to accord with their own honestly held principles, may be forced to do things against their will, that goes against the deepest nature of their conscience. And it cuts both ways. I don't particularly think that an LGBT organisation should have to hire an evangelical Christian. I think, there is space for everybody in this country. There is space for gay people to be happy and to get married and to enjoy the same things that other Australians enjoy. But conversely, there is space for people who are of a particular religious view to live in accordance with that view. They are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, Gideon, I want to, just as a final subject, narrow down a little bit to something a bit tribal. Now, I noticed recently that you actually confirmed your Jewish faith on national television. Now,
I do that a lot.
I know you're not very religious, but you obviously identify as Jewish, and you must have some pride to announce it on national television. Have you had any flack, any problems as a result of doing so?
People ask me that all the time. I joined the Liberal Party on my 16th birthday, for example. I've been involved in politics for over half my life now. Not once anywhere for anybody on the right of politics have I ever gotten anything remotely anti-Semitic or anything like that. The only elements of anti-Semitism, not that I care, by the way, sticks and stones, have come from left-wing lunatics on Twitter or people under the saying, I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm an anti-Zionist, that old word trick. But no, in terms of talking about being Jewish on air, look, if it's relevant, I bring it up. And no, I'm not a particularly observant person, but it's the unique I suppose, element to being Jewish is that it's not just a religious identity, it's a cultural identity. And even though, do I daven, do I keep Shabbat, do I do all sorts of other things I probably should do? Not always.
Not yet.
Not yet. But I did have a very good Jewish education, and again, this goes to the rights of people to send their children to faith-based schools. I'm grateful for having those values imparted to me as part of my education.
So you understand then, as a result of that education, the role and status that Israel has to the Jewish nation
Yes.
broadly. And I understand you've been to Israel.
Yes, I think about 5 times by my last count.
When was the last time?
Last time was when my sister temporarily made Aliyah, so I went to visit her in Jerusalem in the middle of winter and froze the proverbial off for a few weeks. But before that, I'd done Birthright, I've done Mishpatim, I've gone on family trips. I think, it's just part of the course. You always find an excuse to go back to the Holy Land and wheel out some of my very broken Hebrew.
Well, who knows, maybe you could be tempted to join the first AJA tour in March next year.
Yes, certainly considering it.
Fantastic. Look, Gideon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We regard Gideon as one of the rising stars in political discourse. He makes a tremendous contribution and has solid values, whether you agree or disagree with them. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers, thanks David.